Hello, my name is Danny Nowlan and I'm the Director of ChassisSim Technologies. In this video tutorial, what we're going to be talking about is some shortcuts you can use with ChassisSim Lite. Now, ChassisSim Lite has been designed as the kid brother of ChassisSim Standard and ChassisSim Elite. If anything, where ChassisSim Lite sort of falls into the ChassisSim family is it's been designed for small race shops who don't know a lot about how to model a race car, but know they want to use simulation and want to get the benefits from it. But it's also been designed for freelance race engineers who don't have the resources of professional race teams and they don't have the appropriate budgets that go with it, but they still want something that they can still use to simulate race cars so they can really explore and get on top of what's going on. But in this tutorial, what I want you to focus, what we're going to be focusing on is I'm going to be showing you some shortcuts we've put into ChassisSim Lite, or some backdoors where you can still get quite a bit out of ChassisSim Lite. Now, obviously, ChassisSim Lite does not replace ChassisSim Standard and the toolboxes and ChassisSim Elite. It wasn't designed for that purpose. That being said, when we at ChassisSim created ChassisSim Lite, we really created it to do two jobs. We did it to cater for the club racer who wanted to have a bit of a play around and get a direction in terms of where to go in terms of springs, suspension geometry, and other items of apparel. But the creation of ChassisSim Lite was also created by a lot of contact we'd had with freelance engineers that says, you know what, we really like this, but there's no way that we can afford the professional versions of it, and it's really nice to have this at the track. So consequently, this was the environment to which ChassisSim Lite was born in. And what we're going to be discussing in this tutorial is really some backdoors on how to use ChassisSim Lite. So let's get started. As we can see, I've loaded in my monoshock formula free template. And the first item I want to talk to you about is how you go about stretching the aero in ChassisSim Lite. Now, if you click on either the front or the rear wing in ChassisSim Lite, you'll see that you've got your template of various wing settings. Now, for this particular template, it's a little bit basic, and I've set this up to be a little bit basic. But let's just say that you're dealing with an aero configuration that's a little bit off the ballpark. So what do you actually do? The answer is actually a lot easier than you think. Your first port of call is if you click here to edit aero values directly, this brings up the CLA CDA, an aero balance calculator. So all you have to do is, let's just say that you've measured your downforce and drag and aero balance down the main straight. All you've got to do is calculate out what the downforce value is, what the drag value is, and what the aero balance values were, and also enter in the appropriate ride height. And if you click on OK, that will automatically update what the aero coefficient should be. However, let's go through another little trick you can use. Let's just say that you've gone through and by hand you've calculated out an aero map. Now, there are various articles on the ChassisSim blog where I talk about doing it, and also too in some of my articles in race car engineering. I've also discussed at length the approaches that you should take to aero mapping, etc., etc. So if you click on Add Wing, you can click in here the wing name, and I'll just call this my wing name. And what you can do is you can put in your CLA and CDA, your aero balance offset, and your downforce lookup table, your drag lookup table, and your aero balance lookup table. Now I'm going to show you a magic trick. If we go into the aero directory, you'll see in the ChassisSim aero directory when you install ChassisSim, you've got actually quite a few aero maps that ChassisSim will become preloaded with. Now what you can do is, let's take the Dallara F3 map as an example. If I open this up in Notepad, you'll see here that I've got a few values that I can manipulate. Now, if I know what those ride height bounds are, I can actually manually edit those maps. So that gives me a really nice backdoor into manipulating this. Does this replace an aero map? Does this replace the aero map generation features in the professional versions of ChassisSim? Not really. However, what it does do is it gives you a backdoor so you can go through and manipulate what the arrow map is actually doing. And indeed, in this particular situation, if I needed to change, say, the pitch sensitivity properties, what I would do is I probably would open this up in Excel, and I would actually manually edit this in Excel, probably look at some plotting features, or maybe load it into MATLAB, say do some three-dimensional plots in MATLAB, modify the values, and put it back and save it back into ChassisSim. Is this perfect? No, but computer gamers have actually been used to doing this, particularly with applications like rFactor. There's a whole library out there in the game developer community where they'll actually show you the various files that you can manipulate for rFactor, where you can change tire files, etc., etc., etc. And we've really taken a leaf out of this for the ChassisSim Lite the ChassisSim Lite book. So this is really a backdoor, a really good backdoor for you guys to be aware of. The next backdoor that I want to, oh, and also before I go and talk about some other backdoors, if I click on Advanced, you can actually set up your arrow bounds resolutions as well. So as you can see, in ChassisSim Lite, we've given you quite a few tools to play with to manipulate the arrow maps. Now, this does not replace things such as the arrow modeling toolbox, and it does not replace things such as arrow surface fitting. However, what it does is it still gives you the ability to manipulate under the hood. So you can take it really, really simple and just use the preloaded templates, or when your ChassisSim dealer sells you ChassisSim Lite, you can just carry on using the standard ChassisSim map. Or if you want it, here are the tools to provide. Here are the tools that allow you to do it. Now, the next shortcut that I'd like to talk about is manipulating the tires. Now, if we click on tires, you'll see here in light mode, we've got your basic tire settings such as camber, caster, toes, your friction drag, your tire radius, your tire pressure, and your surface tire temp, and your grip factor. Now, you'll notice here that there are two tabs that you can play with. The first tab is the Tire Model Quick Start and Edit. The second tab is the ChassisSim V3 Tire Approximation. Now, let me talk about the Tire Model Quick Start. The Tire Model Quick Start is a very, very powerful feature that I've actually gone into detail in in another episode of the ChassisSim tutorials where I talk about tire modeling, and you can find that on the ChassisSim YouTube channel. But at an instant here are basically all the big ticket items that I can adjust in the ChassisSim tire model if I need to tweak the tire property. So you can see here, I can set my optimum camber, I can set my lateral camber sensitivity, I can set my longitudinal camber sensitivity, I can put my init longitudinal multiplier, I can basically set a constant tire spring rate, I can adjust my maximum slip angle and my maximum slip ratio, and in particular for the traction circle radius versus load properties, all I've got to do is click on here. All of a sudden, I can start manipulating my traction circle radius versus load properties. And what I can do is I can just say, for example, if I want to apply that change alone, I would just click on that check bar, click on OK, and that gets applied to the tire. So as you can see, with Lite, you've really got a really good, while it doesn't replace a lot of the advanced thermal features that you'll see in standard and the toolboxes above, it nonetheless gives you a really, really quick handle on how to really refine that, and that's available through the ChassisSim range. You'll also see that I've got a tab here called Import V3 ASCII Tire File Approximation. Now, in the ChassisSim Modeling in Minutes tutorial, I go through and show you how to employ that with regards to using the tire estimation feature. But effectively, what that looks like is if we go into our help directory and click on ChassisSim V3 tire model documentation, what this is going to look like is effectively this. What it's going to look like is effectively this file here, except obviously minus the comments. So, and what I can do, and what I like to do sometimes, is when I'm really playing with a model I don't know, I can go through here and adjust these. I can go through and adjust these parameters to get it approximately where I need it to be. Now, Obviously, if you're quite content just using a preloaded template, you don't need to do this. But for those of you who really, really want to play underneath the hood and have a really good and get a really good handle for this, I'd really refer you to the tire modeling the tire modeling tutorial on the YouTube channel, which I entitled "Tire Modeling Connecting the Dots." And what you can do is that you can simply copy and paste this. All you need to do is copy and paste this into into a notepad file, and obviously get rid of the comments because you don't need them. And you can basically use this to you can use this to your heart's content. So that's an example of really how to manipulate the tires in Chassis Sim. And once again, taking a leaf out of the computer gaming community, once again, you can build up this really nice library of tar files that you can chop and change between. So once again, with ChassisSim Lite, you can make it as simple or you can make it as complicated as you want. Obviously, what we're playing with does not replace the advanced editing features in ChassisSim Standard and the toolboxes above that ultimately lead to Elite. That being said, it's a backdoor that allows you to get an awful lot of bang for your buck. So this is something that I think is very much, particularly for you ChassisSim Lite users out there or potential Lite users out there, is worth having a look at. The other thing that I want to address is how do you do bump profiling using ChassisSim Lite? Now, in ChassisSim Lite, you typically don't have access to the toolboxes in ChassisSim. Now, there are some people who will sometimes try and mix and match with that, and that's usually the exception that proves the rule. But I'm going to show you a really handy trick for doing bump profiling using ChassisSim Lite without the bump profiling toolbox. So what we do is typically we'll have our monster file, and let me just go back to the arrow directory, and I'll show you where I've put my monster file. So what we would do is we would go into circuit, and we would go into create filter curvature file. We input our monster file. We would input our monster file, and we're clicking here if we use a monster file, and typically we'll go tr whatever the circuit is to create our curvature file. Now, to quote the Joker from Batman, I'm going to show you a magic trick. What we're going to talk about is we open this up in Excel, and what we'll do is that we take a look at basically our 4 damper displacements. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy those, and I'm going to go to File, New, and I'll go to Blank Workbook. And what I'm now going to do, let me go back to my monster file. I'll copy the distance vector, and I'll go into Book 1. And what I'll do is I'll go to File, Save As, and let me just go into my computer where I had that monster file stored. And I'm just going to store this as a text tab delimited file. And I'm just going to call this bump profile Sebring example. Click on OK. Click on OK. And that's saved. Now, here's where things really get interesting. So I'll go back to Lite, and you'll notice in ChassisSim Lite, I've got 2 options to load the circuit. I can either use the preloaded circuits, or you'll still note in ChassisSim Lite, you've still got circuit data that you can use. So I'll load in my curvature file, and let me just load in my bump profile. Now, here's the trick. What we do is with damper scaling factor front, damping scalar factor rear, I'm going to put in 0.2, 0.2. So what I'm doing is I'm scaling the input down. What I've done is I've taken the output of what our dampers are doing, and I'm scaling it back by 20%. Is this perfect? No, it's not. However, What we're doing here is that we're basically using a shortcut to approximate bumps. Now, how you do bump profiles using ChassisSim Lite without the bump profiling toolbox. Is this perfect? No, it's not. However, what you'll find is it's a really clever way of, if you need to simulate bumps, you've got that. The other shortcut that I'll show you with ChassisSim Lite is manipulating your suspension geometry. Now, if you click on your suspension geometry, you'll see here that currently we actually don't have a geometry tab loaded in, but that's okay. If you don't that to manipulate what's currently in the car file, all you got to do is click on edit configuration. Boom, there comes up your current geometry, and that gives you full access to the geometry within ChassisSim. And you can click on analyze configuration. You can enter a whole bunch of different parameters. So even if you don't have a template set up, that's a really handy thing to keep in mind. Feature on tap. Now, with everything that we have just discussed, this does not replace the advanced features in standard and above. And ChassisSim Lite was never designed to be a replacement for standard or the toolboxes or elite. However, what it was created to do was to give small workshops the ability to have simulation software on tap. The other thing it was created to do was it was created to give the intelligent user a lot of backdoors where they could get an awful long way down the road, which is exactly what we've just discussed in this tutorial. So what I'd encourage you to do is, if you're an existing Lite user or if you're interested in ChassisSim Lite, give this a go. Have a play, throw some mud on the wall. The other thing that I'll close on this tutorial is, just remember, for those of you who are considering ChassisSim Lite and you've never used simulation before, just remember there are some subtleties to using simulation software. Just remember, use simulation tools such as ChassisSim as a scalpel as opposed to an axe. What you're looking for is small and consistent changes. If you use it that way, you're going to find that ChassisSim Lite is going to be a very powerful tool for you to use. So, if this is something that interests you, contact us here at ChassisSim, request a demo, and we can get that arranged for you.